Hey everyone, welcome to the Adopt and Embrace YouTube channel. My name is Paul, founder of Adopt and Embrace, and today we're going to continue our live read through Adopt and Embrace Microsoft Teams, a manager's guide to communication, collaboration, and coordination with Microsoft Teams. For those of you that are following along with the live streams, again, we're having some great feedback for people that are kind of reading the book as I read through the content and sharing the stories and things like that. So if you want to grab a copy of the book, head over to teamsbook.info. There's a resource we'll talk about today, the 10 Ps workbook for Microsoft Teams Design. You can get that at teamsbook.info as well, so make sure you check that out. Otherwise, grab a copy at Amazon, at Book Depository, your favorite book retailer, online or offline. You should be able to grab a copy of it for you if you want to. Now, I realize that my headset, my microphone is making a bit of a clicking noise. Just realized that the last couple of live streams. So we're going to try and fix that for the next one. But if you want a perfectly narrated version of this, there is one on Audible where the audio quality is a little bit better as well. So this one's kind of the rough, just read through, informal, casual, let's talk about it, not really high production quality stream of the book. If you want that good quality stuff, head on over to Audible and you'll be able to grab a listen to it there. Awesome. So what I'm really excited about today is getting into the meatiest part of the book, which is part 2. So in part 1, which we've talked through in the last few live streams, that was really all focused on introducing Microsoft Teams and some of the key capabilities of Microsoft Teams that managers would get value from. So we kind of categorized it into 3 different areas, and basically there were 3 different chapters of part 1. So things that we do as a manager when we communicate, when we collaborate, and when we coordinate around our work. And we saw that there's lots of great features within Microsoft Teams that allows us to do those things. In part 2, we're now going into the frameworks itself within the book, talking about how we can structure teams to create the perfect collaboration and coordination spaces for our project, for our team, for our organization, whatever it is that we're working through. So today we'll look at the intro chapter to the 10 Ps. We'll look at the first of the 10 Ps, which is problem. We'll probably wrap it up there after that chapter today. So it'll be a reasonably short live stream today as well. And if you're watching live, if you've got any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat and I can have a look at that. And if you are watching the replay, feel free to get into the comments and share your questions there. We'll get back to you as well. So with that, let's get into the book for reading for today. So part 2, the 10 Ps, a framework for collaboration and coordination success. In part 1, we explored how Microsoft Teams can help executives, managers, and team leaders to better communicate, collaborate, and coordinate. You are now equipped with the knowledge you need to engage effectively in targeted communication with your team members, your boss, and other stakeholders across your organization. However, the collaboration and coordination possibilities may be overwhelming you now. You may be asking yourself, what is the right way to set up a collaboration space for my team, project, or department? How do I get my team on board? Do I just create a team for my team and tell them to stop emailing each other? Is it better to have one team with lots of channels or a handful of teams with fewer channels? What should I call my team? What if I want external customers or suppliers to participate? What happens to the team once this project is finished? Ever since we started working with customers to help them understand how they can improve business processes and work practices with Microsoft Teams, we have heard these questions and many more time and time again. Soon we realized that we were answering those questions in an increasingly consistent way. The result, the 10 Ps framework for Microsoft Teams Design. And the 10 Ps are problem, purpose, people, priorities, principles, plugins, permissions, performance, provisioning, and perishability. In the following chapters, we will explore each P in the 10 Ps framework. Together, they will help you ideate, establish, and configure spaces where you and your colleagues can effectively collaborate on and coordinate your work. The decisions you make based on each of the 10 Ps will help you refine the way you use Microsoft Teams, resulting in better situational awareness, increased ability to focus, reduced risk of sharing information with those who shouldn't have access to it, reduced overwhelm from too many meaningless notifications, and a structured way to communicate to you and your peers. A structured way to communicate to your peers how you're using Microsoft Teams. Now, we've done a fair few workshops over COVID, during COVID, to help customers through that brute force transition to remote work, distributed work, using Microsoft Teams. And this framework has been invaluable in those conversations. And now we've got organizations returning back to the office, and they've got hybrid workforces where some people are in the office, some people are working from home, and they're trying to engage in teamwork using Microsoft Teams. And time and again, this framework keeps coming back as like that the key bit of information, like key framework to tie all of these discussions together, to give us a really clear roadmap in terms of the decisions we need to make in terms of structuring teams to be perfect, or as close to perfect as possible for whatever collaboration situation that we're faced with. So we're really excited to kind of go into the detail here, and we've probably got a few examples we can share as we go through the reading as well. So let's get into the first of the 10 Ps, which is problem. Think about the last time you made a change in your life. Maybe it was a simple tweak, like taking a different route home on your daily commute. Maybe the change was something a little bit more significant and you decided to lose some weight to get back into shape. Maybe you refinanced your home loan or mortgage with another bank at a better interest rate, or you bought a dog that barks in the background of your live streams. Whatever the change you made, I'm also certain that you would have not made it if you were not for the one thing, recognizing that you had a problem in the first place. There was a traffic jam up ahead, is a problem. I'm carrying more weight than I should, which is impacting my heart, is a problem. We're struggling to keep up with our house payments. That's a problem too. Problems are great when you seek to make a change in your personal life, as they can provide context for yourself and the people around you as to why the changes you're about to make are important. However, the power of problems doesn't just apply in your personal life. Problems can be great in a professional context as well, especially if you're trying to persuade people around you, your team, committee, or project group to embrace new behaviors at work. And this is a really interesting one. We did a workshop yesterday, actually, where this came up as a challenge. We were talking about helping a workforce transition to Microsoft 365 generally, and Microsoft Teams being a part of that, but SharePoint and OneDrive and Planner and other things as well. And the one question that quite a lot of the people in the room couldn't answer yet is, what problem are we actually solving? When we've got other collaboration tools and other capabilities within our workforce, unless we can answer that question, what is the problem that we're solving, it's going to be very difficult for us to convince others in our organization to be able to make that change, or even recognize they need to make that change in the first place. So that's why the first P here, problem, is so important. You might be familiar with the principle of the golden circle, made famous by Simon Sinek's TED Talk and his book, Start With Why. Don't just say, let's start using Teams. Sure, you could tell everyone, we're using Microsoft Teams now, so stop emailing and start posting messages in the marketing team that I just created. And some of your team would start to switch some of their work over into the collaboration space you created. Our experience shows that when introduced in this manner, the level of engagement in a team is generally short-lived. People don't understand why they need to make the change. You will have a situation where around 1/3 of your team are in Microsoft Teams, while the rest are still hanging on for dear life to the email filing system they've perfected during 25 years in the workforce. Maybe it's the simplicity of the 12-level deep file hierarchy that they've created on the network drive. When there are pre-existing entrenched ways of doing things in your team, a switch to Microsoft Teams dictated by the manager isn't sustainable in the long term. A lot of unlearning needs to take place. Probably just an aside here as well, with that brute force transition to distributed work with the pandemic as well, it's interesting that all of us could really clearly see the problem, right? We can't go into our office anymore because the offices are locked down. We need to work from home or work from distance because we, just because of, we don't want to expose ourselves or increase risk of catching the COVID virus, right? So it was really clear for everyone that there was a problem, and that helped with that really quick transition to thinking about or embracing new ways of working, because we had to do it. There wasn't really other choice. I think that was a really great benefit, I guess, if you think about silver linings to global pandemics. That was a benefit that kind of really brought everyone together, really clear understanding of what the problem is that needed to be solved, and we kind of could figure out a way forward, no matter which platforms you use to make that path forward, and different approaches to management, etc. The challenge we're going to have as people come back to the office and back into the hybrid workspace is that that problem may not be as clear as it was 10 months ago, 12 months ago, or whenever it is that you're watching the replay of this video. So I think this one here is probably thinking about the problem that we're solving and being really clear about that when we're convincing people to transition to Teams, or convincing people to embrace a new team or collaboration space to do their work in. Getting back into thinking about what the problems are that we're solving is going to be incredibly important moving forward. The result of just jumping in may well be a team that starts with a flurry of activity. then dies a slow death as individuals switch back to how they used to do things with email and that file hierarchy in the shared drive. So how do we ensure that we set ourselves up for success and increase the likelihood that our team comes with us on our Microsoft Teams journey? There are 2 dimensions to problem, the first of the 10 Ps that we need to consider. Firstly, so there's a dog going in the background again. So there's a problem we need to solve, new live streaming studio maybe. Firstly, does your team understand what problems they are solving when they change their style of collaboration and coordination to one that flourishes in Microsoft Teams? Secondly, is it clear what real problems are being solved through collaboration and coordination activity in Microsoft Teams? The former ensures that your team understands why they are switching a lot of what they do over to Microsoft Teams. The latter ensures that they are starting to structure collaboration and coordination spaces that are created in Microsoft Teams in the most efficient and effective way. We'll explore both dimensions in this chapter. Right, the problem with collaboration and coordination. If you have worked for more than about 3 minutes in almost any organization in the world, I'm sure you've been witnessed to, I'm sure you've witnessed one of the most insidious features of the modern workplace. You may have been a victim of one yourself, the reply all email thread. It usually starts out innocently. Christine sends an email to some of her colleagues. Hi everyone, here's the first draft of our presentation for the event next Wednesday. What do you think? A PowerPoint presentation, event presentation.pptx, is attached to the email. Then reality sets in. There are 27 people on the to line and 4 on the CC line. We can't be sure, but there's likely someone BCC'd in as well, just so they have the visibility of the first draft. Every one of those individuals has a copy of the email and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. And our dog's got a copy of it too. You know what happens next, a nightmare which will no doubt fill up your inbox over the next 24 hours. Within 4 minutes, the first reply email comes in. Hey Christine, great work. I just made a few minor amendments to your PowerPoint deck. See attached. There is a file now called event presentation-edits.pptx. 30 seconds later, Dave shoots his feedback through. Christine, not quite sure about slide 3. Can you delete it and replace it with a slide we used for the pitch last month? An hour later, without reading Dave's feedback, Sandra chimes in with some minor edits, as well as introducing some new formatting that she copied in from another presentation. Suddenly, the original author, which is usually me or someone that I care about, of the presentation is overwhelmed with emails in their inbox, as well as multiple versions of the presentation with conflicting feedback that now needs to be manually merged into one copy. Now, back in the olden days, like old days before I started Adopt and Embrace, I was probably 12 or 15 years ago now. I was in a marketing communications role, and this was my life, essentially. This, we send out a document for feedback to 20 or 30 stakeholders across a sales team on new marketing collateral or sales copy or things like that they were writing, or the annual report, and like the pain that we had to go through to merge these different conflicting ideas and things together was an absolute nightmare. And we had to do it all via email back then because that's basically really the only tool that we had. We have it on the file share. That would work sometimes. We still have 26 copies of the same file. Horrendous, bad. Anyone who has been in this situation before knows how tough it is. The only way anyone has ever got past this stage is through pure brute force, and probably some of the hair that I'm missing from up here from pulling my hair out trying to get through these things in the past. If someone steps up, usually the original author, who synthesizes all that feedback and content together into one final presentation. This normally happens after hours or at the very last minute because they have so much else on their plate. This scenario has played itself out in almost every team, in almost every organization in the world. When you break it down, the inefficiency and ineffectiveness of the process is astounding. Hundreds, if not thousands of emails are sent, triaged, maybe filed, and likely deleted depending on the personal preferences of each recipient. Multiple versions of documents are duplicated across everyone's inboxes in an uncontrolled manner. People who remain in the loop and people who are left out of the loop switch between reply all and simply replying to messages. And if valuable knowledge has been shared in the process, it is all locked up in everyone's inboxes, making it very hard for your new starter to discover this information and pick things up next week. In terms of problems that need to be solved, the problem with inefficient collaboration is one that almost everyone in your team will be familiar with. At a bare minimum, making sure your people understand the rationale of why change is necessary will go a long way to helping reinforce new collaboration behaviors. So that's kind of the first part of this problem chapter, is really helping people understand the challenge that we face by doing collaboration, how a lot of us have done collaboration in the past, which is that generally an email-driven approach. So if we can help convince people that that is a problem, that it is costly in terms of time, costly in terms of discretionary effort that we're putting in, the incredible overhead that it adds into processes, if we can convince your team or convince your peers around you that there's a different way of doing things, because we need to look at a different way of doing things, because that's just so ridiculously crazy in terms of how much time and effort it's taking for us. That's really the first step. Now, in terms of convincing people that it's a problem to solve, generally that's pretty easy if you focus on stories or examples of those reply all email threads or things that people have had experienced themselves. So I'm sure there's people in your team that have experienced that collaboration experience that we shared in the book before. And I'm sure there's probably more relevant examples you could think of during your time during COVID as well, when you've been trying to collaborate on documents at a distance and trying to use the VPN, and the VPN being flooded because everyone's trying to get to the network share, or having files going backwards and forwards all the time and not being able to communicate synchronously about them. So like all the overheads of trying to keep up with all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure there's examples you could share. The richer, the more recent, the more explicit examples you can give that really crystallize the problem, the collaboration challenge for your team, the better it's going to be in terms of convincing them to change their behavior and change the way they engage using technology like Microsoft Teams as well. So let's get on to the next part of the chapter. Being clear about a tangible business problem. While reducing inefficient communication, collaboration, and coordination behaviors is a great starting point, we don't get paid just to be better at working together. I don't know anyone who has got out of bed and said, "I just can't wait to collaborate more today." We need to be solving real business problems, overcoming challenges, governing important processes, or taking on opportunities to further the success of our organization. Starting with a problem helps make clear why we are changing our work behaviors. It also helps us to better structure our teams in Microsoft Teams. When we have a list of clearly defined problems or opportunities that we wish to pursue, a good approach is to start with designing a team for each problem. Don't just try and solve 2 or 3 or 4 problems in the one team, as it's likely that solving each problem will require different people or have different information needs. And this is like one of those really key structure of work, design of our workspace kind of considerations that we need to think about here. A lot of the default positions we see people take with team design, or managing, like thinking about how they structure teams originally when they roll out Microsoft Teams in their organization, is trying to align those teams to things that they're familiar with in the organization already, aligning it to the organization chart. So we should have a team for every department in the organization, and then they'll go and create those teams and then populate those teams with people that are in there. Now, in a smaller business, that might be okay. In a larger business, those departments might have hundreds or thousands of people in them as well. And using these structures that exist, which are there to kind of help with performance management or structure of different silos in the organization, whilst in some rare circumstances, I could say it's probably beneficial. Generally, we would say that you're not going to create a better collaboration experience by taking those existing structures that you have and moving them into Microsoft Teams. What you're basically doing is taking that email distribution list that you used to hate getting the emails on from the previous life when you did everything in Outlook, and then moving that over into Microsoft Teams and just moving the problem from one place to the other. We have a really great opportunity to rethink how we work together, how teams work together, how we even define teams in our organization. And in almost every organization that we work with today, teams don't just operate in a silo by themselves. There's so much cross-team and cross-department collaboration going on to react faster, to be more agile, to deliver better experiences to our customers. It's very rare that a lot of the collaboration just happen in one team. So why do we structure the collaboration spaces aligned to an organization chart, which stifles our ability to collaborate and communicate with each other? So this is why we kind of really focus in the book here, talking about trying to ground the way that we design our teams based around real business problems or real business opportunities that you see. If you can clearly define a problem and then try and only solve one problem per team, then you're going to have the right amount of focus, the right amount of people in the team without overwhelming other people with additional noise and things like that. Getting the problem, understanding the problem you're trying to solve one problem per team, right from the start will solve you a whole lot of mess down the track. And we'll see that as we go through the different chapters in the book as well. All right, so when defining the problem you seek to solve, you should ensure that the problem is one that people believe is real. There is no point making up why we need to work in this way. Making sure that the problem is both rational and legitimate will ensure that it's a solid foundation for the way that you group. Hang on a second. Let me reread that sentence again. Making sure that the problem is both rational and legitimate will ensure that it's a solid foundation for the way that you group your teams. I'm guessing we missed 2 or 3 words in that book. I don't even think I picked that up in the live read of the audiobook. Anyway, that's the frustrating part of reading a book that you wrote 14 or 15 months ago. I've noticed a few little mistakes like that we've picked up. So we might have to do a second edition with a few of them fixed up. Anyways, back to what I was talking about. The scope of the problem should make sense for the level that you're operating at in your organization. There are roadblocks caused by our learning management system, which stops our students from fully engaging in course content, is a great example of a problem for teachers or course coordinators to solve. In last year's audit, it was identified that there were not sufficient controls in place to determine the right level of investment in capital works projects. Without visibility and improved governance of investment decisions, we may be liable for action from the regulators. Is another great example of a problem for your board of directors or finance team to solve. To increase the impact of your problem statement, try to be clear about the impact that the problem is causing or the impact that inaction will have. This will ensure that it serves as a more meaningful why for your team and keeps the scope of the problem contained in your team. Armed with a clear problem statement, you can now progress to the next step of the 10 Ps of Microsoft Teams design: purpose. There's a couple, at the end of each chapter, obviously we've got the key takeaways that we talk about there. In terms of what you could take away from this chapter, what you could apply in this chapter. So for this first chapter of the 10 Ps around problem, the key takeaways are being clear about the problem or problems you are trying to solve helps your team understand why they need to switch to more modern ways of collaboration and coordination. Again, if we can't convince people there's a problem to solve, they're very unlikely to want to change the way they do things. Avoid trying to solve multiple problems at once with one team. Don't be afraid to split a problem into multiple teams. And the reason why I say that is that, and if we focus, ground it all in a problem, it means there's enough focus on that one thing. It allows us to, when we don't want to focus on that problem, minimize that stuff out of the team, get it out of the way, move that team away for a few weeks or a few months, and then come back to it when you want to focus on that problem, as opposed to having one team open with lots of channels and getting noise and being distracted by that stuff all the time. So we'll see that start to emerge as we go through the 10 Ps as well. Number 3, start your design journey with the problems you are solving. This will help you avoid creating another overflowing inbox for your team to manage. And number 4, your team will benefit from the ability multiple teams gives them to filter their attention and focus their energy on the right things at the right time. And that's what I was just talking about there. We have conversations in the workshops we run with customers around, what do you think is the right number of teams to have? Is it 3? Is it 5? Is it 7? What is the right number of teams you should be a member of? And we get some really interesting perspectives on that. And some people say, look, I'm really overwhelmed. I'm a member of 12 teams. I'm really overwhelmed. I'm a member of 8 teams and they're really noisy and I can't understand what's going on. I couldn't imagine what it's like being a member of more than 20 teams. And then what I normally share with them is that, well, in fact, I'm a member of 180 teams and we're an organization of 11 people. And we get some really puzzled looks from that. And I say it's probably the most in control and totally underwhelmed I am with communication that I've ever been. There's almost no way to overwhelm me with communication with that particular structure. And it's because we've got a really clear, architecture of how we've thought about the teams. Again, we're trying to solve one problem per team. We basically have a consistent problem, I guess. Well, it's not a problem if I talk about it this way, but it's a challenge that we have where we need to basically coordinate all our work around one particular customer. So we have a team for every customer that we work with. And what that means is that when I'm not talking to customer A, or don't have anything to do with the projects we're doing on customer A, I can minimize that team and drag it to the bottom of my list or just out of the view. I can hide it if I want to. And then I don't need to worry about that. I can just focus on the 2 or 3 customers that I'm working with at the time, have their teams maximized at the top of the screen, see the messages coming through and focus my attention on that. By having that really finite structure of more teams than fewer, it means that we have a lot more control over filtering the information that we see, filtering the communication that we're consuming every day. And it means that I can completely ignore some messages that are happening in Teams for days, if not weeks, because I know that I've got nothing to do with that customer until when I get closer to that time that I need to work with that customer. It puts me in control as opposed to the inbox in control that we've had with Outlook for the last 20 years or so. It's really interesting kind of perspectives on how you think about work, how you engage in content and communication, and how you can get more in control of that flow of work, which we'll explore more of as we go through reading the book as well. All right, so on the end of the chapter checklist, basically two things here. If you haven't done it yet, download the 10 Ps workbook from teamsbook.info. It's on the resources link just at the top of the page. So if you're listening to this, I don't have my laptop set up to show you the view of it today, but I'll do it in the next live stream. Teamsbook.info, click on resources. There's a link about halfway on the page for the 10 Ps workbook, which has basically got all the boxes here that you can fill in to kind of follow through all the different things we'll talk about in the 10 Ps as well. So make sure you grab a copy of that too. I'll just have a quick look at the chat because I've seen Tim's on the line. Hey, Tim, thanks for joining in. Dog's in the background. Of course, the dog barked as soon as we're talking about the dog again. That's great. Inversion-itis every 6 months when we submit our major project status reports to Central Budget Office. Absolutely. I think everyone and every team can experience it in project land where there's lots of documentation and lots of compelling events and deadlines you need to come up to and lots of fast collaboration that needs to occur. That's absolutely something that we see quite regularly, and hopefully Teams is helping you get on top of that a little bit more as well. So what I might do, we might actually go into the second P, which is purpose. We've got a little bit of time left on the hour, so let's keep going with this next chapter for now. And this is the second P of the 10 Ps, purpose. So if we think back to what we just talked about, the first P is problem. We need to be really clear about the problem that we're solving. We don't want to try and solve one problem per team. Okay, that's the first kind of nugget of information we need to remember. Let's talk about purpose. How many times a day are you distracted by something like an email, interruption, or request? If you answered almost all day, every day, you would not be alone. According to the Workplace Distraction Report published by Udemy, over 70% of the workforce admit they feel distracted when they are working. 16% they are almost always distracted, and that was research from 2018, so clearly nothing to do with the pandemic. I don't know what you felt like with distractions during the pandemic, working from home. We had to, our children were doing school from home for a fair bit of last year. There was always distractions going on, probably more distractions than what we had. But actually, let me rephrase that. I don't think there was more distractions. I think there were different distractions and maybe more meaningful distractions than what we had in the office. So probably some interesting thing to explore maybe down the track. The distractions are not necessarily the problem, though. The larger problem is how long it takes to get back on task or back into the flow of work after distraction occurs. According to research from the University of California, Irvine, it can take an average of 23 minutes to get back on track. How long does it take for you or your team members to get their focus back after being distracted? For me, the wasted time it takes post-distraction to get back on top of my priorities is my #1 productivity drain. When I'm in flow, energized and laser-focused on the outcome I'm trying to achieve, work feels effortless and time moves quickly. However, as soon as I'm distracted, it can take many minutes, if not an hour or more, to get back into the highly productive state. I'm sure you've had similar experiences in your work where you constantly battle with two somewhat opposing forces. The need to get work done and the need to appear, let me rephrase it again. The two opposing forces, the need to get work done and the need to appear to be responsive to and supportive of others. It is a tightrope that many of us, as team leaders, managers, and executives, try to balance on every day. Too much focus on the distractions, no matter how urgent or important they are, and you don't get your work done. Too much focus on getting your work done, and your team may flounder without the support, guidance, or reassurance they need from you. And a really classic symptom of this is if you're a manager or a team leader that is stuck in meetings all day, and then you've got to do your actual work at night because you've been in these meetings that probably aren't all that relevant to your role, but you're expected to be there. Which again, any manager has been in that felt that pressure before as well. As you shift your work out of one of the most efficient distraction machines ever invented, the email inbox, full of everyone else's priorities, and into Microsoft Teams, how do you ensure that you are not setting yourself up for failure due to consistent distractions and the resultant cost of lost time and effort? How do you structure your teams in Microsoft Teams to give you more control over how you manage your energy and focus through the workday? Based on our experience with customers who have grappled with this challenge over the past few years, There is one approach we have seen that can reduce the need for team members to be consistently checking and triaging Microsoft Teams every 15 minutes, as they have been with the email inbox for the last 20 years. This approach can also empower your staff to control when they best apply their discretionary efforts and attention throughout the day. This approach is called purpose-based teams. It kind of talks to what I started to introduce probably 5 minutes ago in the live stream around how I do work in teams as well. So what is a purpose-based team? Instead of creating a team based on your organizational structure, like marketing team or human resources, where the purpose or the why we are here rationale isn't obviously clear to people outside of your team, a purpose-based team focuses on the outcome we want to achieve with our peers. It involves a shift away from the email distribution list mentality that is almost always aligned to structure and towards an approach which is more results-orientated. It's more outcome-orientated for your organization. There are a few very obvious examples that come to mind, such as having a team for each project that you're working on. Projects, by nature, should have a clear purpose, so the members of the project understand what they are working together to achieve. Committees are another good example, where people meet regularly to govern specific processes across your business and understand the role they play in forming that group. Projects and committees only just scratch the surface of the different ways groups of people come together for shared purpose in your organization. Generally, the more specific the purpose of the team, the better. But that means I'll be a member of multiple teams. Won't it make it hard to manage? Good question, and I kind of explained the reasons why just before, but I'll repeat it again in the book. At first, you might feel overwhelmed by being a member of 3 or 7 or 27 different teams. However, the beauty of multiple teams is that it gives you the opportunity to focus your attention on different purposes across your day. It allows you to control your attention and not have it controlled by others. Just because you are a member of 8 teams, it doesn't mean that you must have them open, reading every message and responding to every thought throughout the day. Removing the distraction of a team is as simple as minimizing it or even hiding it from your team list. This granularity shouldn't overwhelm. It should help you focus on the one thing that is important to you at the time. If you have all your Microsoft Teams activity occurring in one team, you lose the ability to filter or remove those distractions when necessary. Again, this comes back to you getting back in control of the information that you want to engage with during your workday. If you have one team set up with 40 channels in it or 50 channels, you can't just turn them on and off really easily, like you can if you have it broken into a few more teams. You can just minimize that team or drag it down your teams list as well. So this one here is probably my biggest hot button issue. The one thing I want to convince everyone in the world to consider is just more teams are actually better because it puts you in more control, fine-grained control, filtering the attention that you put into your workday in Microsoft Teams. It's so important. Because you're already clear on the problems you are trying to solve, your task now is to be very clear about the purpose you are trying to achieve as a group. Solving a single problem may require different groups with different purposes, and that is okay. If that is the case, it makes sense to break the team you are working on into 2 or more teams to ensure the right focus can be applied at the right time. What's in a name? The other powerful aspect of purpose-based teams is that the purpose of the group can be a very clear signal to others in the organization as to why you are here, what you are doing, and whether someone should be part of the group. Ambiguous names for teams mean that members can be unsure if they need to participate or not. Clear, direct team names aligned specifically to the purpose that the team serves reduces misunderstanding. It also helps your IT team know why your team exists in the first place, helping them better manage the Microsoft Teams environment in the background. Giving your team a name that aligns with your purpose sets you and your peers up for success. Having your team name aligned to your organizational structure, the department you're a member of, or the location in which you're based may make the management of teams easier for your IT team, but it doesn't necessarily serve the best interests of those who need to work together in the space. And I don't know if we talk about the next chapter or not, but actually we do talk about the next chapter. I'm talking about like prefixes that IT teams put on teams and how we're probably not a big fan of it, but that's in a couple of paragraphs time, so I won't do a sidebar conversation about it now. When naming your team, it must be readable by humans. And that is actually a really important thing to remember because we've seen some absolute monstrosities of naming conventions that work great for systems, but not great for people that need to use them. Having lots of prefaces or prefixes in front of a team name to make life easier for IT will hamper your team's efforts to find the right team to participate in at the right time. Consider how people will read your team name. If you're in a country where you read left to right, the most important or distinguishing features of the name should be as clearly as possible on the left-hand side. A good example where we worked through recently was with a university. Should the course or unit code be first, or should the name of the subject be first? And that's an interesting conversation. It actually took us about 3 or 4 hours to navigate through with this customer, just that simple naming convention, because it had impact across 30,000 students and how they'd use Teams. So some really important decisions that you need to make. But if you have it, again, focusing on the most important information on the left-hand side makes it easier for people to consume or understand what the team is all about. Why is this important? Most people using Microsoft Teams will only see the first 15 to 20 characters of a team name when they have Microsoft Teams open on their desktop, and even fewer characters if it's open on their mobile phone. The name you pick for your team should help distinguish quickly between the different teams that you're a member of. Being a member of 13 teams that all start with brackets corp, brackets marketing, brackets HQ dash team name, or marketing team dash inbound, or marketing team dash content will not help you achieve that. While we recommend that you don't front load your team name with too much unnecessary information, there is one important signal that should be included in a team name, and it's whether someone from outside your organization is participating in the team. We will cover the reason for this in the next chapter, focused on the third P, people. All right, so key takeaways from the purpose chapter. Don't just recreate your organizational structure. Think about purposeful collaboration. Have one clear purpose per team. Make sure your team name represents your shared purpose in fewer than 50 characters. And the end of chapter checklist. So if you haven't grabbed it already, head on over to teamsbook.info. Grab yourself a copy of the Team 10Ps workbook, which you can find on the resources tab at the top of the screen. Just go around halfway down that page, you'll find the workbook there. And you can fill in the purpose page and discover what your team name is as well, which is great. So what I'll do, I'll just see there, got another comment there from Tim. I'll have a quick read of that. Your perspective about multiple teams is very interesting. Multiple teams isn't the cause of your overwhelm. It's just an effective visualization of what you're facing. Yeah, that's maybe it's an interesting way. It's I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. Yeah, the team isn't the thing that's going to overwhelm. How many folders we have isn't going to overwhelm people. It's just how we control the flow of information in and out of our eyes or in and out of our ears or into our minds, right? And if we don't have if we have it all in one team, we've lost complete control. It's just like our inbox that we had before. If we have a couple of teams and there's different kind of focuses, but maybe it's not designed all that well, they can still be pretty noisy. There's still lots of communication going on that isn't relevant to us, isn't relevant to our role, or is relevant to us and is relevant to our role, but it just isn't relevant right now. It might be relevant in a week or a month or something like that. So having more fine-grained control and more teams that we can have that fine-grained control with allows us to reduce that noise, reduce all that input that we'd normally be trying to process and distracting us during our workday, and really help us just get laser focused on exactly what it is what we want to put our focus on at a time. I don't know about you. I've throughout my career, I've felt like I can multitask pretty well, but as I've got older and wiser, maybe I've realized that multitasking is just probably the most inefficient thing you can try to do. So the more we can just reduce that noise, reduce that distraction, and just get focused on that one thing at a time, that makes life so much easier and get so much more done. And if we design teams well in Microsoft Teams, we can absolutely make teams work for us and help us achieve that. If we design teams poorly and just try and do it all in one spot or in a few spots, we miss the opportunity to kind of really transform the way we think about how we consume information during our workday and how we engage with information, and ultimately where we apply our discretionary effort during our workday. So hopefully that that's an idea that a lot of you can take away from the book at least. It's something that we've put into practice. Like we can hand on heart tell it helps 1,000 times more. There's one really interesting thing you need to consider with that though. The role of tagging people in posts and things like that has a really important role to play when you go to that really filtered view with lots of teams. Later in the book we talk about that a little bit more, but I'll give you the kind of preview to it now. It works perfectly well, lots of teams, as long as you have this one rule in place, and that is do not mention me if you're just sending me a message. Do not mention me if you're just FYIing me on something. Only mention me in a post. Only mention a team if you want us to take action or you want me to take action based off that message. That way, instead of getting 27 notifications when I wake up in the morning, I can look at the 3 notifications that I've got that are really clearly actions that I need to take on during the day that might have some time-bound sensitivity to them. And then every other message in Microsoft Teams, I'll just read it when I get to it. But yeah, if you've notified me or mentioned me in or tagged me in lots of posts, I lose the ability to use that notification as a way to triage what I focus on at the start of my day as well. So really interesting things we can think about there, which goes beyond just tagging people when you want them to see a message, because the more you do that, the more the less impact that notification has, and the less power it has to help people navigate their workday. And ultimately, the Teams drives people's behavior, not people being in control of that behavior as well. Anyways, that's probably enough today. We might do two of the P chapters every live stream, because it's a nice, easy way to do it before I lose my voice when I go reading through it. So moving forward, next live stream, what we'll do, we'll go look at the people chapter, which is chapter 3 of this part 2. And then I think chapter 4 would be priorities. Now, sorry, principles. Oh, no, it is priorities. Let me get that right. It is priorities. So people and priorities. The first 4 of these are problem, purpose, people, and priorities really help us answer some of the really important questions about how we're going to set up our team in the first place. We only want to solve one problem per team. If it's multiple problems that we've got, we want to break that into multiple teams. We only want to serve one purpose per team. So if we're solving a problem, but there's a few different groups of people coming together serving different purposes, we need to break that up into separate teams as well. So yeah, one purpose per team too. That purpose should really be nicely articulated in the name of the team, so you can be really clear about why we're coming together there. The next chapter we'll read next time is around people. Who are the people that need to have access to this, and what level of access they should have to the conversations that we're having in the space? Are we going to bring external guests in the team? That kind of thing. So really important questions about that. And then priorities is where we start thinking about, what are the priorities of this group? What are the things that we need to focus on? If we had to pick 5 to 7 things that we could focus on as a group, what would they be? Those priorities really align nicely to the channels that you'd have in your team when you set it up originally. So in the next live stream next week, we'll go into a bit more detail about those 2 chapters. But with that, I'd like to say thanks everyone that joined live. Thanks, Tim, for putting the comments in there as well. Really appreciate it. Again, if you want to grab the 10 Ps workbook, head on over to teamsbook.info, click on resources, and you can grab it there for free. Just for those of you that want to use that workbook in your organizations, we've licensed that with Creative Commons, so you can pick up that workbook, you can deploy it on your internet, you can share it with your people, you can make it part of your team owner governance processes that you might have in your organization. Feel free to use that PDF as much as you want. The license is there in the PDF, so you can see exactly what we allow you to do and not do with that. But it's great to hear from organizations around the world that are starting to put the 10 Ps into practice in the way they manage teams as well. So with that, thank you so much. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and I'll catch you next Thursday. Have a great day. Catch you later. Bye.